All right, everyone, welcome back to the deep dive. We've all been there, I think, right? Just like this constant hum of the digital world, just pings and notifications, never ending scroll. I swear, it just never stops.
It really is just a defining, like a characteristic of just modern life, right?
Yeah.
These devices, they offer us so much. It's pretty amazing, but they're constantly just competing for our attention. And it can feel like we've gone from, actually using technology to
Well,
being used by it.
totally. Yeah. And that's what we're actually diving deep into today, this phenomenon of digital overload. So we really want to understand like what's happening, how does it affect us? And then, this is the big question, like what can we actually do to just step back and gain a little bit of control over this stuff?
Yeah, and the sources for this deep dive, they're just fantastic. They give us this incredible look under the hood,
Yeah.
just the basic mechanics of digital overload, the psychology that's keeping us, hooked to our phones, the real consequences to our well-being, and then thankfully some really practical strategies for creating a healthier relationship with technology.
Right. And it really does touch like almost every aspect of our lives. I was blown away by this stat. So the average adult in the US is spending over 6 hours a day on digital devices, 6 hours more than a quarter of your waking
It's
hours.
pretty crazy when you think about it.
It's wild, right? It makes you just pause and think, where's all that time going?
Yeah.
That leads me to, something I want you to think about, our listener. But just take a minute, reflect on your day yesterday or even just this morning. How many times did you reach for your phone without even thinking about it? I feel like just that little bit of self-awareness could be really eye-opening.
Totally. I think those unconscious, almost automatic checks, they really are the biggest contributors to this feeling of being overwhelmed. It's not, one big thing. It's the accumulation of all those small moments, and it really just adds up.
Okay, so let's actually define this when we talk about digital overload. What are we talking about? What are we describing?
Yeah. So at its core, digital overload is just this feeling of being completely swamped by this sheer volume of digital stimuli that just bombards us daily. I'm talking the endless notifications from countless apps, the constant emails demanding your attention, and of course the nonstop updates and interactions on social media. It's just relentless, and it just leaves us feeling so mentally and emotionally drained.
I know exactly what you're talking about. It's like,
Mm.
you're trying to juggle way too many things and eventually something has to give, right? Like you're going to drop a ball or just feel completely stressed out by the whole effort. And it's those little things, right? That quick notification check or just one more minute of scrolling. It seems harmless in the moment.
And each individual instance might seem
Yeah.
small, right?
Yeah.
But over the course of a day, they compound, and then they create these overwhelming patterns of digital engagement.
Hmm.
So it's the sum of these seemingly small interactions that leads to that pervasive feeling of just being constantly on, never truly able to just disconnect and recharge.
So we're walking around with these crazy powerful computers in our pockets and they are just constantly vying for our attention. It feels like a real double-edged sword. I mean, the connectivity is incredible, but it feels like there are some serious downsides.
Right. There are pros and cons for
Hmm.
sure. I mean, the advantages are amazing. The instant communication, having access to all this information at your fingertips, all the entertainment, but this constant accessibility and the pressure to stay informed,
Hmm.
immediately respond to everything, it can really lead to some major drawbacks that have a real impact on our well-being.
Okay, so we've got a pretty good picture of what digital overload is. Let's try to figure out why we're so drawn to these devices. What's the psychology behind it? What's keeping us checking, scrolling, tapping?
This is where things get really interesting. So our brains are wired with this natural reward system, right?
Yeah.
And a key player in this is dopamine. It's a neurotransmitter. Dopamine is involved in feelings of pleasure and satisfaction when we get a notification of, like on social media, even a new email. It triggers a little dopamine release. And this creates a positive association with checking our devices. Think of it like a, neurological pat on the back.
Oh, so it's like a little shot of happy chemicals every time our phone buzzes or lights up. That makes total sense.
Exactly. So you can almost think of your brain like this reward machine. So each time you engage with your phone, you get a little positive feedback, even just seeing that red notification badge, and your brain anticipates that pleasurable feeling. So this anticipation becomes a powerful driver that compels us to keep checking, even when we don't really need to or when there's nothing new to see.
It really is a loop, right? It's like we get a hit and then our brain just wants more. So we keep going back to our phones over and over and over again. It's kind of like how habits are formed in general, right?
That's such a great observation. And research shows that this cycle, the cue, the reward, the repetition, It really is similar to how we form habits and even addictive behaviors. It's not just the content we're consuming, it's the act of checking itself
Hmm.
that because this ingrained behavior. And one thing I found really interesting is this idea of variable rewards.
Hmm.
So app designers, they use this, you don't know when you're going to get that next like or notification or whatever. This unpredictability actually makes the habit even stronger. It's like a slot machine.
It's so true. It's like our brains are constantly hoping for that next little surprise. And I know one of our sources talked about someone who was really struggling with this constant checking what happened when they actually tried to like consciously break that cycle.
Yeah. Yes, it was a great story, and it really highlights how powerful it is to understand these psychological triggers. So she decided to do a digital detox right. She started setting specific times to check her phone, she turned off all the non-essential notifications, and she started experiencing some pretty significant positive changes, like she was able to focus more intently at work, she could actually get things done, and she said that her overall mood was much better, which really just shows how important it is to be aware of these underlying mechanisms. It's like the first step to taking control.
That's super encouraging. I mean, it shows that even these really ingrained habits can be shifted once you understand what's driving them. So we know the psychology, but what are the real world consequences of all this digital engagement? How does it affect our health, our well-being?
Yeah, I mean, the impact is huge, and it really affects us on a physical and a mental level. Physically prolonged screen time can lead to a number of issues. I
Yeah.
mean, we see more and more complaints of eye strain headaches, poor posture, musculoskeletal problems like neck and back pain. And something that I think we really overlook is the effect of blue light that's emitted from screens. And this blue light, it actually interferes with our body's natural circadian rhythms, which can make it harder to fall asleep and impact our sleep quality.
Oh, yeah, that's huge. I've definitely felt the eye strain after a long day staring at a screen and the sleep thing. That is huge. I'll admit, it's so tempting to do a little last minute scroll in bed, but you really do pay for it later.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And, our bodies and minds, they need regular rest to function well, right? And using these devices, especially before bed, it disrupts these really important natural cycles. And then mentally, the constant information, it contributes to more stress anxiety for a lot of people. And our attention spans, they can decline, making it harder to focus at work, have engaging conversations with people. And it's interesting because we're more connected than ever digitally, but sometimes it comes at the expense of those meaningful face-to-face interactions, which can lead to feelings of isolation and loneliness.
It's pretty ironic, right? Like we're
Yeah.
using these devices to connect, but it can actually make us feel more disconnected in our real lives. Have
Yeah.
you ever just felt that like mental fatigue or even irritability after spending a lot of time online?
Oh yeah, definitely. That feeling of being drained or emotionally exhausted after too much screen time, it's super common. It's your mind and body just signaling that they've had enough. They're feeling overloaded. And recognizing those feelings and realizing that they're connected to our digital habits, that's a really important step toward recognizing that we need to make a change.
Okay, so we've definitely laid out the challenges here now. Let's talk about solutions. What are some things that we as listeners can start doing to implement a digital detox and start to regain some control over this stuff?
So one of the most basic things is setting digital boundaries, making deliberate decisions about when you are going to step away from your devices. So it could be something as simple as scheduling tech-free hours of the evening or during meal times, or even considering something like a digital Sabbath, like a whole day on the weekend where you're completely unplugged.
That sounds like a really good starting point, just creating those dedicated times where you're not expected to be constantly online.
Yeah, definitely. Another good technique is to designate specific times to check email and social media instead of reacting to every notification as it comes in. So you might
Yeah.
decide, okay, I'm checking my messages 3 times a day, mid-morning, after lunch, late afternoon. And this way you can stay informed without being in this constant state of alert and interruption, can really reduce that feeling of overwhelm.
So instead of letting the notifications tell us what to do, we're taking control and choosing when we connect and catch up.
Exactly. And along with those time-based boundaries, creating tech-free physical zones in your home is huge. Your bedroom is a great example. Making a rule to keep all devices out of the bedroom can drastically improve your sleep quality and help you create a more relaxing environment. It just helps to break that association of the bedroom with stimulation and distraction.
It really makes sense. It's like creating this mental association of the bedroom as a sanctuary for rest and relaxation, not a place for endless scrolling.
Absolutely. And there are so many digital detox tools available now that can really help you out. They can track your screen time block, distracting websites, set time limits for apps, send you reminders to take breaks. It's like using technology to help us manage our technology.
There is some irony there, but if it helps us regain control, then it's definitely worth it. Now, one of our sources mentioned this brief guided visualization exercise as a strategy. Can you talk about how that works?
Yeah, so this is about using your imagination to envision and connect with the positive outcomes of reducing your digital engagement. Close your eyes and picture a typical day where you're not tethered to your devices. Imagine being more present in your interactions, engaging with your surroundings, having time for activities you enjoy, just feeling a greater sense of calm. This kind of mental rehearsal can really strengthen your motivation to make changes.
It's like hitting the mental reset button. Just picturing that calmer, less cluttered day can be surprisingly powerful.
Exactly. It helps you tap into the positive emotions and feelings associated with a healthier digital balance. So disconnecting doesn't feel like deprivation. It feels like something positive, something you want to achieve.
We've talked a lot about the personal impact of digital overload, but it also has broader social and economic consequences too, right?
Oh, absolutely. Socially, we're relying more and more on digital communication, which is convenient, but it can sometimes hurt the quality of our in-person interactions. We might seem more connected on the surface, but the depth of our face-to-face connections, which are so important for our well-being, our sense of belonging, they can suffer when we're constantly distracted by devices. Genuine presence and undivided attention. It's becoming rare.
It's a big difference between quickly scrolling through a friend's social media feed and actually sitting down having a real uninterrupted conversation with them. There's a level of depth and understanding that can be lost in the digital world.
Right. And economically, the impact of these distractions at work, it's massive employees who are constantly interrupted by notifications, emails, and, just the urge to check their phones. They have less focus, less productivity, less creativity. And in this fast-paced business environment, all those little distractions add up to big losses in efficiency and output.
So it's not just about feeling overwhelmed. It can actually hurt our performance and the bottom line for both individuals and companies.
That's right. But the good news is that when we take steps to regain control over our digital habits, we can create more meaningful interactions in our personal lives. And we can create work environments that prioritize focus and deep work, and that leads to more productivity, innovation, and a greater sense of fulfillment.
It's a really optimistic perspective, just managing our digital lives better can lead to real positive outcomes personally and professionally. It makes you think about all those moments of lost focus and what we could achieve if we had that attention back.
Exactly. Just thinking about those missed opportunities can motivate us to make some changes.
Now, our sources included a lot of great insights from expert interviews and scientific research. What were some of the key takeaways from those perspectives that stood out to you?
One of the most fascinating things I learned was from Dr. Samantha Lee. She's a psychologist who studies digital behavior. And she really emphasizes that this dopamine-driven reward system that we talked about earlier, it's at the core of why we're so attached to our devices. She said, quote, "Every ping, every alert, every new piece of content, it's a tiny, unpredictable reward that your brain learns to crave, thus reinforcing the checking behavior over and over again," end quote. So it's not just willpower or a personal failing. Our brains are responding to these carefully designed feedback mechanisms.
It's like we're being played a little bit.
A little bit. And there's a lot of research that shows a clear connection between too much screen time and higher levels of stress, anxiety, and even depression in some cases. The constant information, the pressure to keep up online, and FOMO, it all contributes to a lot of stress.
It's true. Even if the information we're consuming isn't negative, just the sheer volume of it and the feeling that we need to keep up, it's just overwhelming.
Yeah, definitely. And the experts, they all agree that when it comes to changing our digital habits, we need to set small, achievable goals. Trying to change everything overnight usually leads to feeling deprived, and it's not sustainable. It's much better to make gradual adjustments consistently over time.
So it's about taking baby steps and making sustainable changes, not trying to do a complete digital detox that you probably won't stick with.
Right. The goal isn't to eliminate technology from our lives. It's just not realistic or even desirable, but to use it in a way that supports our well-being and productivity, not takes away from it.
Okay, so we have a good understanding of the problem, the psychology behind it, the impact, and some general strategies now. Let's get practical. How do we create a personalized digital detox plan? Where do we even start?
So first, become aware of those areas in your life where technology feels most intrusive, or you want to create more space. So think about your morning routine. Do you immediately reach for your phone before even getting out of bed? What about during work? Are you constantly checking emails and social media even when you need to focus? And in the evenings, is scrolling the last thing you do before bed? Just honestly assessing these patterns is super important for figuring out where you want to make changes.
It's about taking a look at our habits and really identifying those moments where we feel that pull the strongest or where technology just seems to be the most disruptive?
Exactly. And once you're more aware, you can set clear and specific goals for yourself. What do you want to achieve by reducing your digital engagement? Do you want to cut down on your overall screen time? Do you want to improve your sleep? Do you want to have more focus time for work hobbies, spending time with loved ones? Clearly defining those goals is going to give you motivation and a roadmap.
It's a good point. You know, having those specific goals makes it feel less like you're restricting yourself and more like you're working towards something positive.
Totally. And then the next big step is creating a structured schedule that includes digital time and dedicated tech-free time. So you allocate specific times for checking emails, social media, or whatever you need to do online, but you also designate specific periods as completely tech-free zones. So an hour or two before bed, all meal times, specific blocks of time during your workday for focused work with all notifications off. It's about creating space and time for the real world for focused work, for connections, instead of letting the digital world take over.
It's like we're proactively taking back control of our time and attention.
Yes, and finally, it's important to track your progress and make adjustments as needed. You can use the screen time tracking features on your phone or, explore dedicated apps that can give you more detailed insights. Some people like to keep a journal to
Yeah.
reflect on how they're feeling, notice improvements in focus. Sleep overall well-being. It's all about finding what works for you.
Tracking can be really motivating, even if it's just seeing those little improvements over time.
It really is, and it gives you valuable feedback. You can see what strategies are working, what needs tweaking. I would encourage you, our listener, to pause right now, grab a pen and paper or open a note on your phone, and jot down a couple of initial thoughts about the areas in your life where you want to create more balance, and maybe one tiny realistic step you can take today or tomorrow. Remember, it's about progress, not perfection. Just think about how it might feel to have more control over those interruptions and more mental space for what matters to you.
Honestly, just the thought of having more clarity and less of that digital noise in my head sounds so good and like really freeing.
It can be.
So looking ahead, what does the future of digital wellness look like? Are there any cool developments on the horizon that could help us manage our tech use better?
This field is evolving so quickly. It's exciting. We're seeing more sophisticated AI-driven screen time management tools that can learn your habits and offer personalized suggestions. We're seeing advanced mindfulness and meditation apps that are designed to help you be more present and less reactive to all the digital stimuli. It's pretty cool.
So technology might actually help us manage our relationship with technology.
Right. And the idea is that our devices could become more proactive in supporting our well-being instead of competing for our attention all the time.
Hmm.
Creating more intuitive systems that respect our need for balance, focus, and rest.
It's like having a mindful assistant instead of a demanding boss.
Exactly. And just take a moment to picture your ideal digital life.
Hmm.
What would it look like if technology worked in harmony with your well-being? Supporting your goals, not pulling you away from them. Thinking about these possibilities can give you even more inspiration as you're working on creating your own digital balance plan.
That's a great way to think about it, focusing on the positive future we're working towards, not just what we're restricting ourselves from now. Our sources also included some really interesting case studies and a Q&A session that addressed some common questions from listeners. Can you share some examples and insights?
Definitely. I think it's helpful to see how other people have navigated these challenges.
Mm.
So there was this case study about Alex. He's a young professional who was feeling super overwhelmed and unproductive at work because of all the digital distractions he was dealing with. And he decided to create a digital management plan. He set specific times for emails turned off, non-essential notifications during work, and he was able to get back so much focus time, like over 2 hours a day. It boosted his productivity, and he ended up getting a promotion.
Wow, so more focus work led to a promotion that's a real tangible benefit.
It is. And then there was Maya. She was having trouble sleeping, and she decided to ban screens from her bedroom an hour before bed. She started reading physical books and doing mindfulness meditation, and her sleep improved drastically. She felt so much more rested and had a positive impact on everything else in her life.
That's great. These are great examples of how making small changes can lead to big positive impacts. In the Q&A, it addressed some common hurdles, right?
Yes, it did things like how to deal with social pressure when everyone else seems to be constantly online. The advice was to communicate your boundaries clearly and kindly to your friends and family. Explain why you're doing this, maybe suggest other ways to connect.
So it's about being intentional and finding what works for you, not just feeling pressured to be available all the time.
Exactly. Another common concern was how to set boundaries when you need your phone for work And the strategies there were to create specific work hours for digital communication use, do not disturb, set up email autoresponders, and talk to your colleagues about realistic response times.
Yeah.
You don't have to be available 24/7.
It's about creating that separation between work and personal life, even in the digital world.
Right, and then there were questions about specific apps and tools for tracking and reducing screen time. And while specific recommendations can change quickly, the general advice was to look for tools that give you a good understanding of your app usage, let you set time limits, and have features like website blockers or the ability to schedule focus time. The key is to find tools that help you become more aware and in control.
It sounds like they really covered a lot of the practical stuff that people need to know.
They did. The goal was to provide actionable, evidence-based advice so people could actually make positive changes.
This has been a really eye-opening and helpful deep dive into digital overload. As we wrap up, what are the biggest takeaways you want our listeners to remember?
The main message is that while digital overload is a real and growing problem, it's absolutely something that we can learn to manage effectively. And by understanding the psychology behind our habits and consciously implementing strategies for a healthier relationship with technology, we can regain control over our time, our attention, and our well-being.
So it's not about disconnecting completely, which isn't realistic, but about intentionally reconnecting with our lives in a more mindful way where technology works for us, not the other way around.
Exactly, and I would really encourage everyone listening to pick one small concrete step today towards creating more balance in their digital lives. Whether it's setting a digital curfew, dedicating the first part of your morning to mindfulness before checking your phone, keeping your phone out of sight during meals, every little action counts.
It's a great call to action. Starting small can really build momentum.
It really can. And remember, this is a journey. Be patient with yourself, celebrate your progress, and keep striving for more balanced, fulfilling life.
Well said. Thank you so much for guiding us through this topic to our listener. Thank you for joining us. Stay mindful, stay connected with what truly matters, and keep reclaiming your life.
It's been my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Of course. All right, we'll see y'all next time.